So long. I've been in vicious door so long, crying, Lord, Lord, give we more time for prayer. I've been in vicious storm so long. Oh, this your honey time. Oh, this your honey time. Crying, Lord, Lord, give we more time for prayer. I've been in vicious storm so long. Oh, I love, oh, morally, I love, oh, morally, they, Lord, Lord, give me more time for prayer. I've been in vicious storm so long. Now, hang on, children. The country all the children. What the course? Yeah, the cracker didn't call American. Papa York, yes, East, Creek, South, other rest of the children. Yeah, the cracker didn't. Of course, that's the American. Now, of course, chicken. Back then, the Shaddai, we the dead one. Now, grow up all of this shit. He came in, just like this shit. On snot. Grab God, all of the children come out. All of the Lord. See, all of this shit will be dead. And at one time, now, yeah, the children, the cracky people, water the kind. They had more like a window. Said, water will bring me. And they water will take me back. And they make a no say. They can take me back. 40 children, they'll get cracky. A truck, be a little thing going in the marsh. A truck, otherwise a place like this. Long the shoreline, thing like that. Yeah, there's such a thing for now. For now, when I want to get you on, when Moses, see we did it on the shoreline, the gas and everything like that. Oh, we have gone way on they get back their house. And then these other rest of children coming. Stop for death and honor. All long after this shop. Stop the Savior the King. And rather was after all of this shop, whatever they call it, Queen Carolina, all the things that I've gone. He started to see the children of kind and started to get, where were you? He said, no. I don't know what that is. What a cracky? Take me go and stand. And said, oh, I didn't know you're trouble. But no, the same children. They said, we ain't gonna know we were in the trouble. I come here for cracky things with me. We want to know how we the school did it, what we to be. Relevance. When I come in, the cracky people are like, so we. So now stand, we told y'all, we don't stand and talk. So now, then I know say, they get one with what they did. Then they go to crack the teeth, but then they crack the teeth with me. So sometimes I have to go on the honor and get some of me. When you have to go on and go on and come back, go on crack the way to come back, over here to the honor. But see, when they get one with like that, then we can't speak the language of the other world, as well as speak the language of our own world. So that this way, when these strangers come in with these terms that don't even exist in the Gullah Geechee language, expert, architect, preservationist, scientists, we don't use these words. But yet we have the people. We know how to do another word that doesn't even exist in our language called adapt. And we found out that we are the living embodiment of a word that all of those people, those experts and those scientists and those preservationists and those planners like to talk about now. They say we're resilient. We actually didn't know the definition. When I looked up the definition, I said, oh, that's my culture. I got it. Y'all gonna call it Gullah Geechee. And that would work. But then the rest of the world didn't know about Gullah Geechee. So the same way, and I'm gonna look at me like I'm there, but me one good thing I gotta that the rest of the world doesn't get it. So the same way y'all looking at me, all strange, the rest of the world does that a lot too. When they hear our language, but especially when they realize our traditions are inextricably tied to the lands and the waters in such a way that, as I was saying, when we told the strangers who were coming into the Sea Islands, don't build where you're building. We don't build on the water and into the marsh and into the shoreland because it won't stand. They told us we were crazy. And they said, oh, you're emotional natives. Okay? Planners said, oh, those are just the emotional natives, and the politicians believed them. And so they went ahead and they zoned so that people could take the entire shoreline from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, which they called the Low Country because it's technically below sea level to begin with. He said, it's no problem. Why not build a resort there? Why not build a hotel there? Why not build another golf course there? Maybe because we can't eat the little white balls. That's why. And also because there's this thing called tide. Comes and goes a couple hours every day. And there used to be a word for what it does to the sand called erosion. But people kind of don't use that word anymore. Instead, they talk about the changes, the climate science, the climate change. And then they came up with another term that makes no sense to us, sea level rise. We say, yeah, y'all just realized that the sea level rises and does that every day here. So in my community, people are like, what's wrong again with them folks? Maybe if we get rid of the bridges, they'll stop coming. I said, no, because they got yachts and boats and things, and they said, yeah, that was the problem the first time. That's how we got here. They'll come even without the bridge, but they forget what they come in on is the water. And as we say, the water might bring you, and the water might take you back. So in the Gullah Geechee Nation, although our ancestors, the Igbo, Mandinka, Malinke, Yoruba, Gola, Gizi, Mendi, Temni, Fiki, Bibio, were brought over to these sea islands that literally we live in the Atlantic Ocean. They're called the Barrier Islands. We were brought there by force. We then recreated the landscape, and my NPS people call it a cultural landscape. We have a national heritage area, the first one to ever be designated in the U.S. It was the 37th one that then gave knowledge and acknowledgement to the rest of the world that the Gullah Geechee culture does exist, and actually built the infrastructure of what you now call the United States. Along with this, that so many still, when they ever read about us, think about us, have heard about us, say they come looking for us still. The cotton that was king, the Sea Island cotton, and the queen, the Carolina gold rice. On the children, they got none of this for their money. Y'all don't have any of this in the lunch boxes, do you? No. Sad, sad. If you were where we were, you definitely have that on a plate. Because to this day, this rice is still a staple of the African diet. It is still a staple of the Gullah Geechee diet. It is then captured in the midst of really indigo souls. These three cash crops were not all of the cash commodities. My people were called black gold, black cargo. Black gold because of the richness they brought, the cash that they brought when they were sold. And now there is a new gold rush to the black gold, the ones who had they pocket people like other shit like Hunter Tillanadu, the ones that speak that different language other than yours. Now people want to talk to us. But, you know, the emotional natives are no longer emotional. In fact, hey, maybe they're onto something. They only been on those islands since the 1600s. Maybe being place-based has some value in the scientific world. Here I am, an Ivy League graduate of honors with a computer science and mathematics degree, but when I told you that over 20-something years ago, I was an emotional native, stripped of all my credentials all of a sudden because I was talking about the placement psychiatry. But I wasn't qualified in the group to say I was an expert in historic preservation, or I'm an expert as a historian, or I'm an expert as an architect, or I'm an expert in environmental studies, or I'm an expert in this, but I'm yet an expert in science, and it doesn't take that much to calculate the risk of what you're about to place there. When I studied engineering, and was the only one at Virginia Tech, in fact, to build a bridge that they never could break to this day. But there's a few bridges we like to break in the Gullah Geechee Nation. The ones that keep bringing people who think we're still just emotional natives. While the water's rising higher and higher and the trees are laying down and we're saying there's something wrong. Hey, County Council, General Assembly, EPA, somebody, y'all like to bring your people when you want to talk to us after the hurricanes. Can you come now? We got something we'd like you to look at. They said it's not in the budget. We don't know exactly what department would handle that. The politicians are only concerned about what tax base we could bring in if we build more. They watch Field of Dreams one too many times. If you build it, it will come. And now that they came, they put down more asphalt. They put down more roads. They put down more pavement. They put down more impervious surfaces that we said, no! You're doing the direct opposite of what our ancestors did. When we pave a Sea Island road, it's done with oyster shells. These things are natural to the environment, so they'll go back to the earth like we will eventually. But let's not rush our time because we're not doing this thing right. But they looked at us and said, well, well, no, they just don't want change. And then the same people now argue whether climate change or not exists. They liked the word change before. Love it now. We need you to love it now. Because trees are supposed to be standing up, not taking a break, laying down. All along places like Hunting Island and Hilton Head and, oh yeah, Hilton Head is one of our beaches, one of our islands, where native Gullah Geechees were until they were displaced by all these things that everybody else wanted to come in with to recreate, but not to continue cultural tradition. So, when people ask about preservation, I often point out to them, well, the only thing that I really like to preserve is the things my mother taught me to preserve. We grow our okra, tomatoes, and all of that, and corn. We put them in the jars. We call those preserves. We call it jarring. Y'all call it preserving. We put it there canning. We put it away. We put it on the shelf. When you do want to eat it, like what y'all are doing now, we can open it up and we eat it. But guess what? When you finish eating that, it's gone, never to be returned again. The vessel's empty. So I don't consider myself a preservationist because that's the kind of imagery I see. Something beautiful sitting on a shelf until you just want to use it. And when you use it up and it's gone forever. I'm a cultural continuationist. I use the word preservationist because I learned by crossing those bridges that all of other folks know that word. And it does exist in their language. So community engagement can start or end that easily. Are we speaking the same language? If I'm in a trouble now, I got to share the full time, I think I got it, I think I got it, until I'm thinking of it.
No.
See? One person who knows what I'm saying said nothing. Right. If I spoke in my own language for the whole next hour, what will y'all get out of that? Now y'all agree the answer is nothing? Only one more person understood that. ¿Qué pasa? ¿Cómo estás? I need to change language. Oh, okay. All right. So once again, when we start talking about coming into communities and we start talking about the dynamics of what's happening, there really isn't one community's issue anymore. It's just like where you're seated. This I love because my community's culture is always about circles. We gather in circles of house. When we live in a family compound, we live in a circle. Our national flag of the Gullah Geechee Nation, you see, are circles, and they encompass a family tree. Those are human bodies intertwined, again, inextricably tied to one another. So we can never separate the Igbo from the Mandinka, the Maninke from the Yoruba, the Gora from the Gizi, the indigenous from who we be. So to this day, like the deep roots of this family tree, we have grown our culture in the Sea Islands of what is now called the Gullah Geechee Nation, which encompasses all those Sea Islands, Jacksonville to Jacksonville, and then 35 miles inland to the St. Johns River, that often is referred to also as the Low Country of Carolina, Georgia, where, yes, the tide, the sea level changes every day of my life. I've seen it. But I've seen what we used to call a spring tide become known as a king tide. And I said, oh, so you're not the king anymore. The tide is now, huh? Remember that song, the tide is high, but I'm moving on. Right? Y'all remember that? I see a few people grooving. The rest of y'all want to act like you were just born. Cut it out. You know that song. So, yes, the tide being high is causing people to move on, but where will we move to? We might need more of that amphibious housing we just watched a little while ago. Because we can't all pick up and move. There is no place for everybody on the globe to just go. But why don't we make the movement here and here? Because that's going to make the difference. If we can move the minds, the thought process, as a man or woman thinketh, so is he or so is she. If we elevate the discussion, elevate the way in which we make our individual choices, we may help the conditions in which we live, and we may all be able to stay based at the place where God put us. Because I sure know that's where our tree and our roots are, and that's where we intend to stay for another 400 years or so, no matter what they think of the emotional natives. We've survived floods, hurricanes, earthquakes throughout the Gullah Geechee Nation in that 400 years, and yet we still did it. People would say, what do y'all do when the hurricanes come? I said, we stay and we pray. And they would go, huh? Okay, no, that's not the answer we need, because you can't quantify that. Just like people have now said, well, as we talk about adaptation and resilience and cultural heritage preservation in the face of sea level rise and climate change, how do we calculate and quantify the cultural communities, the cultural heritage assets, the tangible ones and the intangible ones? You can come off young thing like that and live in Newport and thing like that, and can't quite the people, 100 children, and every rest of the rice and thing like that, and one and only get along. They got 100 children, me, what's on the other. So it wouldn't help me much to live here in Newport with y'all, since y'all can't even understand me talking, right? So although I might be still a Gullah Geechee person wherever I go to live in the world, my culture won't exist the same in another place in the world. And this is something we've known, but something we've now had the opportunity to teach by engaging with the community that tends to live on the other side of the bridges. That we have the opportunity to let them know that don't always come to the Gullah Geechee Nation looking for people to be dressed like this with a sweetgrass basket on their head, with some cotton in it, and without shoes. We actually have shoes. We actually have electricity. We have these things called computers and smartphones. Y'all are laughing, but I am telling you, I have had to tell people this. Because, really? Really? And me being a computer scientist, I had them before anybody on the island even knew what I was talking about, actually. Now they get it a little bit but they prefer to be, as y'all would call it, off the grid. So even when you Google Earth and Google Maps, sometimes you can't find us. We like it like that. Because there have been too many explorers that have found us, but when they found us, instead of doing what people are now realizing, they should trust the natives, trust the locals, learn from them. They instead say, well, no. I mean, why would you, oh my God, why would you have this undeveloped land here? There are too many trees. You didn't think that when you were vacationing. But now that you live here, I don't want the deers in my yard every morning eating stuff. And these raccoons, the little bandits, they're taking all of the food. Well, you can't leave your food out on the porch and don't think that they're going to not think it's a snack. But now they want to unravel everything that they saw because they can't have coffee makers in their homes. Somehow they need to build this box called Starbucks. And it needs to be right down where they can walk to it. And we don't understand it. Because breakfast for us ain't a cup of coffee, it's some grits and gravy with some good old shrimp and thing like that, and mullet and thing like that. Oh, I don't want to make you too hungry. I don't know what's in the boxes. And so here it is that we said, well, why is it that this place was so beautiful to you when you came to visit, but it's not beautiful enough when you come to stay? And when we say to you, no, you shouldn't get a dock permit for that area because your house shouldn't be that close to the water. We're only saying it because I have relatives in my family that are over 100 years old, and they will let you know that used to be where we planted Carolina gold rice. And if you build your house right there, it will sink. It's not going to stay standing. You don't even have to worry about what's going to happen when the tide gets high. Well, we do get the spring now king tide. But there is something that people don't relate to when you're not of their culture, and they still come in acculturated as they were from the urban areas, and they say, well, we don't see a problem. We don't see why we can't build something else. Let's just fill it in. And we watched a man try to cover an entire area that had been a Carolina gold rice paddy. He pumped and he did everything. And he got to the point we nicknamed him Swamp Man. Because every time we looked, this man was trying to get the water out. We're like, that is a swamp. It always has been. The marshlands on the other side of the island, that's a swamp right there, and he'll never get all that water out because that's where we didn't mind the water rising, because you needed water to rise and be held in there to grow the rice. You let it out with the trunks when you needed to. He didn't know about that science, but then again, he moved in and never spoke to any of us natives. He's deceased now. And we wondered if he didn't get a heart attack trying to pump all that water out. Literally. But again, it's about what language you speak, but it's also about whether we're communicating with one another or not to begin with. If you already come in with preconceived notions and you already say, well, I specialize in this, or I have my PH and my D, how dare you tell me that I don't know what this is? Although what I've done has all been on PowerPoint, it's all been theoretical. I haven't actually done it in your community yet. You can't tell me I can't do it. Oh, yes, I can. Because actually what you think is new, we probably have seen it all. So I thought about what's going on amidst the discussions that are so different in the way that people are communicating and articulating in this place and in this space called Newport, that to me twins with one of our cities of the Gullah Geechee Nation, Charlestown, South Kakalaki. Why don't you know them as Charleston, South Carolina. Hello from Charleston, where you like to come and see the sweetgrass baskets and have a little sweet tea on the piazza. We know many of you snowbirds do come down our way. And so here it is that now people are coming to Charleston by the millions as tourists. But then they're coming by the hundreds of thousands to millions that want to stay as retirees. And then the retirees are upset because the people of childbearing years that actually can work from home are also moving and saying, yeah, this is a better place for me to raise my children than in urban environments that now, not only do we deal with the crime rate, but we now deal with the sea level rise that's also hitting the cities, and cities where there were never hurricanes or superstorms, they're hitting there too. So I might as well take my chances in a semi-tropical environment. Let me come down there and live where you are. And we say, no, please don't. We love you, but stay where you are. They don't listen. And so I found it very interesting and intriguing that as I looked around to find out more about Newport, Rhode Island, which I had heard nothing of as I was growing up as a Gullah Geechee, that I would find in the very history book written about Newport this wonderful opening that says, picture the scene that had been played out yearly since the 1750s. Dozens of people lined up along the long quay in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina, in early May, waiting for their extensive belongings and their intended house slaves to be laden onto the ship. The captain strides among the expectant passengers, welcoming those he knows from previous voyages, and greeting others who are making their first excursion north. Soon, the large gangplank is lowered, and the well-dressed, the well-manicured ladies and gentlemen, yes, and their well-behaved children, march on board to secure the cabins, and then stroll along the deck. As the vessel slips its moorings and heads into the Atlantic Ocean, the sense of relief and excitement mounts amongst the passengers. Behind them, throughout the murky Carolina marshes, lies the pervasive seasonal pestilence they're escaping. Ahead of them, after some 8 to 12 days at sea, is their safe haven and salvation, Newport, Rhode Island. So yes, I wondered then, I believe in divine order. I wondered, was this now supposed to be my safe haven when I read that on the way up the mountain? Until as soon as we took a dip coming down, there was an EMS vehicle stopping us in the road, and I said, oh no, that's not the sign you were giving me. There must be something else. And that something else came as really a twinning of two cities. As I went over and around the corner and went to Hunter House and went to 74 where some of our fellow conference participants are right now. And we actually saw sump pumps in the bottom of the house, but they said, well, you're visiting now during low tide. I said, so in other words, I can sit on your steps and watch the tide come up and down. They said, yes. I said, but not a wonderful sunset here either, is it? From in the basement, watching the tide come and go. At least at home, I could sit on my porch, or in Charleston, they sit on the piazza, and they could sit out on our point there, in Beaufort on the point, or in Charleston on the Battery, and watch a sunrise and set with the tide, knowing that certain parts of the towns are high enough. Or so they thought. St. Helena Island, where I live, where we are on what we call the hill. My family compound is on what we call the hill. We've survived numerous storms when those storms actually flooded the city of Beaufort. The historic homes, though, are not directly on the waterfront. We have the Henry C. Chambers Waterfront Park. So at least when we got flooding last year, the water kept coming up into the waterfront, but it didn't make it all the way up to the houses. Last year when levees broke in Columbia, South Carolina, which all of us in South Carolina said, we have levees? We didn't know they were there. It's no wonder they didn't maintain them. Nobody pressured them because we didn't know we had them. And all of a sudden the water came rushing down from the Midlands toward what they call the Low Country in the Gullah Geechee Nation. The blessing was, because we live on sea islands, that water would end up back in harbors and rivers and estuaries and marshes way before it would get to us on St. Helena. Had I not had social media, I would have never known it was going on. I don't turn on the dummy box to look for the bad news. So here it is. And I said, but this connection of disconnection from the people and the culture that exists in a place and a space, and to run from things that to the people of the culture are natural to that place, and to be able to have the luxury and leisure to leave a place and live somewhere else for a few months and go back to somewhere else for a few months, is just not part of our history, not part of our existence, not part of our culture. Because in my community, this is very real. And 100 folks want to know, where you going? When you coming back? Why are you going? Okay, well, 10 of y'all go with her. They never want you to go alone. And they definitely don't want you to be going alone. So there's no way they would have had ships big enough to bring Gullah Geechee families to Newport to escape, as they said, the pestilence. But I'm wondering now if people aren't thinking water is a pestilence. Because it's a pest to them. But to us, it's a blessing. We know it's a place of cleansing. We know it's a place of retreat. But retreat in terms of going to relax like in the spa. Not a place of retreat like run away from it. So when I come into other communities where these words mean something different, I start to think about adding up the modes of communication. And so I sat here this morning, and it came to me, access diverse dynamics. Because if we do not access and assess diverse dynamics, we all think that the way that our particular group of people live is the way everybody else does. And it's not true. Or we think we have the hold on all the common sense in the world and nobody else knows anything. Scientists in the room, I know you don't want to say anything right now. So here it is. I said, but these folks are here thinking about history. And at that moment, the word history for me became heritage, integrity, sustaining traditions, our resources, and yourself. So for us, when we look at history in the Gullah Geechee Nation, that's what it is. It's about our heritage. What is there that's tangible and intangible, as my socio-anthropologists would tell me, of the terminologies that they tend to use. All right? What is there that makes us who we are? And how do we keep it? How do we keep it alive? But who has the integrity? You go to the elders. And I didn't say the elderly. I said the elders, meaning the people of wisdom in the community that can pass down the traditions. They can say to you whether what you're doing is authentic or not. Whether this is sustainable, meaning you can keep it going or not. And then you go to that word sustaining, but what are we sustaining? Traditions. What traditions? Building away from shore. There is marsh that can grow. How does it grow? You need to have those oyster beds there so that those oyster beds can protect them from the erosion that will take the marsh away. Don't eat all the oysters and never replant the shells. We can't pave every road with the oyster shells. We can't make tabby buildings out of everything. We learned that generations ago. Take the seeds, which are the shells, and put it back. Let the baby oyster have some spat to make so that you can have something else on your plate. Because those oysters then clean the water for us. One oyster will clean 50 gallons of water in a day by itself. We don't need to have filtration systems if we leave things like God put it. God gave us the filtration system. Then when they're there, they just naturally are hard, you know, like the guys sometimes. And they stand there doing what they do. The birds come and they feed. The other smaller fish feed. They have a whole ecosystem to themselves while the marsh grows on the other side that they protect. And when the marsh grows fine, the trees grow back. When the trees are there, they hold on to the sand. That's how we get what they call the maritime forest, which makes up the sea islands. Now, how many people here have ever been on one of the sea islands? Raise your hand. All right, pretty good amount of you snowbirds. We know. I know no one's going to tell me they golf now. I know none of you are going to admit it. But how many of you sail on any level? Small vessel, yacht, cruise ship, and yeah, some of y'all go cruising, right? Like you say, but I don't operate the thing. But here it is that many people don't realize the value of coming into a community and seeing how it operates, what it does operate. They can't figure out the serenity that you get from being able to stay there along those shorelines where your ancestors have been for all these generations. Just sitting out by oyster docks, walking throughout the Gullah Geechee Nation where that Spanish moss still grows as a reminder of all that our ancestors sat beneath after a hard day working in those cash crops, all along these shorelines of the Sea Islands, from Jacksonville, North Carolina, to Jacksonville, Florida. We now see our marsh regrowing as we replant oyster beds. These are some of the things that the community has engaged in doing because they value the tradition of our oyster factories like this one that sits on my island right on this particular creek that we call Club Ridge Creek in the midst of St. Helena, or down further at Hunting Island. You can see where the original beds are, the ones that are now growing, because we did replant those shells back on that coastline, and now it's becoming more vibrant. We're now seeing where trees that had fallen, we see next to those trees that are growing up again, because it takes us physically going out, leaving the ballrooms, leaving our desk and our computers, and analyzing how much space of land do we plant the shells and how much shell do we have? What is it going to benefit? Is it going to benefit people like Ed Atkins, who has Atkins bait that his family left from generations ago? Is it going to benefit my family to continue to make the bateau boat, to still go around on Jonah and cricket, things like that, for cast and things, for bringing in all of that thing? Is it going to benefit our cast net makers that are going to continue that tradition? Or is everything going to be changed as the tides flow in and the people go out? Are people going to go back to going to these new places now where people have built these piers and these docks? Are we going to go crabbing that way? Either way, however we get them, trust me, we're going to eat them. Because we love to do crab balls and crab cracks. We're right there in that family compound where we pass down to the next generation our traditions of how to fish, our traditions of how to sew the cast nets, so that the next generation will thrive and survive no matter how high the sea rises. It lifts all boats, we were told. And so we intend to be there, yet and still, learning the children how we to be and who we to be, right here in the land, or the Gullah Geechee. Still sharpening thing, like we've been doing on Sullivan Island, where we have such a thing, the Connie to Charlestown, and even on nearly right there in Old Town, to pay a tribute to who we to be, and the praise God that we be Gullah Geechee, anointed people that still yet stand on that shoreline, even when other people don't understand how we do what we do. We know that we are united with the land, the water, the sea, and this year, the who we be. We be Gullah Geechee, anointed people. So in our work, coming out from amongst our family compounds into places like this, we've met scientists, we've met historians, we've met socioanthropologists, environmentalists, preservationists, people who just love seafood, just love the Sea Islands. And we put together a work called We Be Gullah Geechee, Cultural Collaboration Anthology, to put together some of the lessons of how you come into a community and respect that community's culture, but can still do research. But let the research be something that the outcome is not just a paper for you to get your thesis completed and get your master's or your doctorate with, but something that can then be returned to the community that they can use as a guide for the next set of people coming in. And then we don't have to keep having to be resilient against experts and scientists asking us to say questions over and over. We can say, here you go, read this first. And then if you have any more questions, come and we will set a focus group, or we will take you out on field outings. We do a number of things with the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition that are community service learning projects, so that students of certain fields of study can come and they can learn from the community while doing something that they believe to benefit that community. They are not just, as we call it, parachuting in, right? And then grabbing whatever it is and running and jumping on whatever next plane and we never see them again. Or maybe they got on a yacht that at the end of that journey to Newport, they made their way back down. But they're living somewhere gated off from us and we never see them. They never talk to us. And when they come out, obviously, we can speak their language, even if the Hunter Children can't hardly keep you in, anything like that. I can communicate with you. The thing is, how much time have you taken to even stop and do that? That's usually the biggest issue of community engagement. The community says, we don't know them people. We don't even know who that is. They're here doing what? Who brought them and who sent for them? And if you say, well, the county council brought them, oh no. FEMA sent them, oh no. But if you say, well, hold it, so-and-so from down the road over there that live in the blue house, yeah, I going to school with her mama. Yeah, she brought them. Oh, okay then. What they doing? Then they might not mind sitting down over a good old plate of shrimp and grits talking with you to find out who you are first and why is our community of interest to you. And that if I spend my time talking to you, how is it going to benefit my community as a whole, the entire circle, not just me as an individual? Because one of the lessons that many have had to learn is that you can't go and pay this one person a $50 stipend to talk to you and feel like you've gotten all the knowledge you need about the entire culture and the entire cultural community. And because that person really has said little or nothing because you fed them all the questions in the way that you wanted them to answer it back anyway, that ultimately you write your report that, yeah, you got agreement, you got community consensus. No, you didn't. You spoke to one person that just wanted to make $50. And then there's all these hundreds of thousands of people who don't want to talk to you at all because there's always another one of you coming that has a question of some kind that they've answered over and over. And there's nothing in exchange. They don't see what you're leaving. They only see what you're taking. And so you have to think about that when you start to talk about planning anything for a community. Think about the fact that it doesn't really matter. If I come on a Balto boat, you come on a yacht, somebody else comes on a cruise ship, are we all going to meet up at the same point and disembark and sit together and communicate or not? Or are we going to be like this room and instead be our own separate circles that don't link up? Or are we going to now connect those circles? And in that point of intersection, be the place that when that tide rises, we don't drown, but instead all of our boats are lifted together. And one thing I wanted to really address was something I heard used twice in this conference that I never heard used in this way before. And the statement was about poverty. And I know over all the generations of Gullah Geechee Nation's people have been called land rich and cash poor. And I heard Mary Rose say today, poverty is very resilient. I heard yesterday the statement by Adrian Burke, poverty is the best protector for preservation. So I said, once again, maybe these people are speaking a language I don't understand. Because the word poverty doesn't exist in Gullah either. We're always rich. You have your family, you have a place to stay, you have land, you have food, you're rich. Your spirit is rich, you're rich. If we would call you impoverished, it's because something's wrong with your spirit. Or your health has totally failed. But other than that, we don't think of it. So I said, let me look it up. And poverty was defined as the state of having little or no money and few or no material possessions. And I immediately thought back on that quote I read from the book. And I said, right, the ships were laden with their goods. And we don't need to travel that heavily. And especially if we want to float, you sure don't want to travel too heavy. So I said, well, okay, I like to cross-reference. So I said, let me do what a lot of the young folks do. I'm going to Google it. And I wanted to just see if the word poverty also meant the same thing elsewhere. And it said the state of being extremely poor, said the state of being inferior in quality or insufficient in amount, or the renunciation of the right to individual ownership of property as a part of a religious vow. Well, we have prayed to God never to relinquish our right to our property in the Gullah Geechee Nation, so we can scratch that one. The material part, there are plenty of people who have a lot of things, but they have them just because they like having them, but they don't consider themselves necessarily different in our community just because they have a few extra things than the other person does. It's like, okay, you got that, so what? I don't even want that. So it doesn't matter that you have that. So we don't base ourselves off of this, but this one, the state of being inferior in quality or insufficient in amount, struck me because I said that maybe that's been the problem. People think that other people are insufficient in the amount of knowledge that they have that they can share. And until we change that, I would say the person who thinks that way is the one who's impoverished, not the one they're coming to get something to take out. So until we start to recognize and value everyone and what we add to the discussion, we're going to always have conferences about how to calculate what's of real value. And while we sit and wait and calculate, the water is rising. If I were you, I want to get in this boat or that yacht or a skiff or something and rise with the rest of us. And so